If you're a brand designer early in your career and you're currently struggling with all kinds of things like loads of revision rounds, not really sure how to increase your pricing, and also not really sure how to justify your creative decisions to your clients, you might want to consider how strategically you're actually designing. Stick around, let's talk about it in this video. So what do I mean by designing strategically, and how is that different to becoming a brand strategist, and shouldn't we just do that? Well, as somebody who took 2 years before I started offering brand strategy as a full-blown service, I can tell you now that you can still provide massive value to your clients by just designing strategically and not actually offering the full brand strategy solution. You can still be a very high-value designer without actually offering a full brand strategy solution. So how do we do that? Well, I think the first thing is to understand how strategy and design are inherently slightly different, and to understand each of those roles so that we can work out how to take a bit from both so that we can still provide high value work that is actually going to be quite impactful and is going to give your clients a sense of motivation and ownership of their brands. So let's have a look at strategists, and I'm talking specifically about brand strategists in this case, but most strategists, their entire role is to take somebody from A to B, and it's usually focused around a certain goal or objective that you're trying to achieve. They're essentially designers of roadmaps as opposed to designers of creative, and their whole job is to influence where brands and businesses move in terms of their positioning, how to define vision, and really how to maximize on their client personas, etc. Okay, so let's have a look at what a strategist's role is in its purest sense. A strategist is essentially there to help facilitate a journey for a client from point A to point B. And usually defining point B is focused around a certain goal or objective that client or business or brand is trying to achieve. And really a strategist will come in and help dissect, interrogate, and direct certain insights and create what's called a roadmap or a strategy document, which is going to help a business make decisions about the trajectory of that business as a whole. Often brand strategists have a huge influence over how a brand is communicated overall in terms of communication pillars, messaging, how we direct our brands towards certain audiences, how we position the brand, and how we compete strategically in a marketplace. A designer's role, on the other hand, is there to translate ideas visually in a way that is both aesthetically pleasing and serves a certain function for a real human. It's important to keep in mind that designers' jobs at heart are to solve problems using visuals and the art of design to basically make humans' lives easier or better or more enjoyable. So this can fall into UX design, experience design, etc. There are so many different categories, and like I said before, so many different philosophies of thought on design, and we're not going to get into that today. But it's important to remember that designers are there to serve a function, and they are not there to just create art for art's sake. So how do you take the job of creating something that is beautiful and serves a function, but making sure that you're making those creative decisions based off of, well, strategy, without actually having to write that strategy yourself? Well, let's get into that. So where does strategic design come in, and how do we blend these bits of strategy and bits of design to make sure that we're designing strategically, and what does that look like? Well, it's important to note what it does not look like. And as a strategic designer, your role is not to actually influence the overarching trajectory of a company. You're not there to help them redefine mission and vision statements, reposition them in the market, or even redefine new audiences and make clever decisions about the business's direction. What you're there for as a designer is to create a visual solution to a problem. And usually if you're a brand designer, the problem is the fact that they are not communicating effectively visually. So they don't have a logo, they don't have something to put on packaging, they don't have something to use on business cards, etc. It's sometimes as simple as that. Your role in this case as a strategic designer, as opposed to a brand strategist, is not to influence or redirect the brand in terms of its core function, market position, audience, etc. You're not there to define vision and mission statements, like I said. Your role is simply to translate. And in order to translate, you must first understand. And so to understand, we like to ask specific questions. And so really the process of strategic design starts at the basic foundation of asking your client a couple of really well thought out questions. And then it's going to be a case of learning how to listen and translate those answers into something that's going to make sense from a design perspective. So without further ado, let's jump into 6 of my questions that I recommend you ask your clients in the early phases of your design projects. So now that we've gone over all the questions to ask and why they're super important for the strategic designing process, how do we actually do it? How do we pull these insights from our clients and turn it into something that's actually usable in the design process? Well, I'm going to come straight out and say it that the most powerful and impactful way that you can gain these insights from your clients is on a call, face to face, over Zoom or Google Hangouts or something like that, where you pretty much jump on a call and you facilitate this question and answer process. It's going to allow you to do a lot of listening, and it's going to allow you to take notes and to listen to a client just talk organically about their business and what they believe. It's going to create much more raw results that are based on a gut feeling as opposed to pre-thought results where the client is trying to make it sound right, if that makes sense. If you're the type of designer who really struggles on face-to-face calls and you haven't quite worked up the confidence to do that yet, it's okay. There are a couple of other ways that you can do this, and my next best solution is to create a workbook. Now, I had a workbook for about a year early on in my design process, and look, they were hugely valuable. I now prefer doing it on a call, of course, but a workbook definitely has its place early on in your process. And it also offers your client the opportunity to take some time over answering those questions. If a business is young, it can sometimes be difficult to give some thought to these questions. They can be quite challenging. And so giving your client a workbook to fill in gives them some space and time to think about those questions and send them back to you. You can always then follow up with another call to then go through that workbook, which will kind of lessen the pressure on you and offer your client the opportunity to elaborate or explain or actually change their answers if they've thought of something after the fact. It also gives you the opportunity to ask questions if something doesn't make sense to you. So once you've gathered those answers and you have your insights all in one place, you want to make sure that you're actually using it to then feed back to the client or what you've heard to make sure that you've translated it accurately before you move into design. So what I recommend you do is that you pull it all together into a PDF. You can do it in a Word document and then export it as a PDF. And you call it the brand direction document. So no, we're not creating a robust brand strategy, but it's going to give you a really strong foundation for design. And I promise it's going to reduce those revision rounds if you can then learn how to apply the design and justify it from that direction document. It's really, really important that you then take your client through that document or insights doc to basically check that you've heard them correctly. I cannot stress that one of the most important things throughout the brand identity design process is checking in with your client that you've translated what they've said and felt accurately. You always want to be checking in. Have I heard you correctly? This is what I understand you to have said in this case. This is what I hear is really important to you. And it doesn't take you being a fully qualified brand strategist to learn to listen to your clients really effectively and then to feed back what you're hearing. It's going to give the client an opportunity to validate or explain again or to create clarity if there's missed opportunities or something that you haven't translated totally accurately. This is going to give you such a strong foundation for your design and again is going to reduce the likelihood of your client pushing back or relying on subjectivity when giving feedback. you can take things one step further, and when you present this brand direction document, it's actually a great opportunity to now present creative direction alongside that. And this is how I used to do it for a very long time. When I was creating these brand direction documents, I made sure to then also create a mood board or 2 mood boards to present along with that and say, here, have a look at how I've understood what you've said to me and what that looks like in terms of creative inspiration. It's a really nice founding point, and it's a really good place to start with your client and connect the storytelling and conversation to design. So you can build in 2 or 3 rounds of revisions on the mood board so that you actually get a chance to really build that out. But it's a good place to start linking strategic thinking with your design process. It's key to keep in mind that there's a number of questions you can ask your clients, but in my experience, I've found that these 6 questions really give me really great insight into a client's brand and business and the story they're trying to tell. And that in and of itself allows me to make decisions creatively about how I'm going to design their logo or their brand identity elements in such a way that they're actually going to have more impact, and I'm not going to be going back and forwards with my client to try and justify my creative decisions, because I can anchor them on research and insights from our conversations. It is also a really great way to enroll your client early on in the process so that they feel like they're involved in the creative development of their own brand identity. They feel like their story has been heard, and you're not just going about choosing colors off the top of your head because that's what everybody else is doing. You're actually going to create something that is bespoke and fitted specifically to them, which, by the way, is going to make you more valuable, so you can have a look at upping your rates once you start getting this right. So let's jump into those questions. Number 1, the first question I always ask my clients is, tell me about how you got here. I want to understand my client's story. What led them to starting their business? What have they done up until this point? What are the challenges that they're currently experiencing? And how have we gotten here to this point today where they're speaking to me about rebranding or creating an identity for their business? You want to make sure that you give your clients lots of space to talk about this and ask them a few other clarifying questions. Don't let the question get too far away. You want to give it about 10 or 15 minutes. Make sure you're taking notes and paying attention for any gold nuggets or interesting threads that you can weave into the design story. It's going to help create something that is a lot more meaningful for the client, and stories are always great when trying to attract an audience. Which leads me to number 2. Who are we talking to? I think a lot of the time we forget as designers, or we can forget, especially early on in our career, that we're not actually just creating for our clients, but we're actually creating for our clients' clients. And we need to understand that the brand identity that we eventually develop is going to need to attract an audience. And we can't understand how to translate those designs unless we understand who that audience actually is. So one of the key questions you want to make sure you're asking your clients early on in the process is who their audience is. So obviously this begs the question, does my client actually know who their audience is? Well, this is where it can get a little bit tricky, but you want to make sure that you're encouraging your clients to think about this. You can sit with them and help them create ideal profiles and things like that, and there's lots of different ways of doing that. But you want to make sure that you're touching on this, and you want to make sure that your clients actually understand who they are trying to sell to and whether or not they've given that some thought. Question number 3, what are they trying to evoke emotionally in that audience? We need to understand that buyers make decisions based on emotion first, and then they try and justify with logic later. We all do it. Humankind do it. We make decisions and we move based on emotion first, whether we like to admit it or not. And then we always try and justify with logic later. So keeping in mind, you can actually leverage that as a business and as a brand, and you as a strategic designer need to help your clients understand that we need to lead with emotion. And design is emotional by nature. Color has got different feelings that it evokes. Fonts evoke certain types of feelings. And so you want to understand what those feelings are that we're trying to create so that we can make strategic decisions about the design choices, like font selections and color selections, graphic styles, photography, etc. All of it's going to come down to what we're trying to make the audience feel. and you want to get your client to start articulating what that might be. So a nice way to help them do this is to actually have a couple of examples of how emotion influences design, and color theory is one of the easiest ways to do that. If you're wanting to understand color, we have a freebie in the description below that you can check out. Question number 4, and one of my personal favorites, is the personification of brand, and really making sure that you're bringing in the identity. And one of the best ways to do this is to actually ask your client, if the brand was a living, breathing person or walking around on the street and you could invite them for coffee, what would that person look like, behave like, talk like, dress like? What are their favorite colors? What do they like to eat on the weekends? What are they like as a person? Are they fun-loving and carefree? Are they super serious? You want to ask them to start thinking about this. Now, if you're the type of identity designer who's working with smaller brands and entrepreneurs, a lot of who they are will be injected into that brand. And as designers, our sort of role is to help our clients work out where they stop and their business starts. And one of the easiest ways to do this without getting too in-depth into the strategy side of things is to ask them this question, is to try and imagine how they would personify their brand as a person. And if it's pretty much a carbon copy of who they are, well, that's super easy, because all they need to do is describe themselves to you and you can create a visual personification of them in brand format. Question number 5, and one that might sound ridiculously obvious, but one that you really need to make sure you're having a clear conversation with your clients about, is what do they actually do? And what purpose does it serve? And this one is a particularly tricky one for service-based business. So if you're the kind of designer who works with people like coaches and consultants, etc., this is a key question to ask your clients, because you really, as the designer, want to understand what your client actually does on a day-to-day basis and how that business and process works. Is it going to impact design directly? Probably not, but you'll be surprised how much a greater understanding of what they do will help you create solutions for their business. A good example of this is if you actually engage your client in asking them about what they do and how it works in terms of their delivery of that process, you can understand how their business runs, what types of challenges they meet. You can actually start offering up, design solutions for things like collateral, etc., that would support the way their business runs. So then you become a far more valuable designer as well, because now you're going above and beyond to understand that, say, for example, they have quite a robust onboarding process with their clients. You might suggest to them, well, why don't we create a form design, or why don't we create a banner or something like that, just to make the experience that they're already doing a lot more better and on brand. Remember, when you're designing an identity, it's not just about the logo. It's about all the different places that a customer is going to experience that brand, also known as touch points. And you really want to make sure that you're making smart decisions about how to design those things for your clients. And you can't really do that unless you understand what they do and how it works. So make sure you're asking your client early on in the process. And last question, number 6, what impact does the work they do have on their clients? And I'm not just talking about sort of the practical side of things. I'm talking about the real emotional impact. And again, this might not directly influence how you make design decisions, but it's really going to help you as a designer understand what you're dealing with here. And it's also going to help you manifest visually, for example, if you're wanting to create brand patterns or assets, to understand how your client's work is impacting the end customer, because it might influence how you decide to add little snippets and storytelling elements to your brand identities that are kind of going to hint at that end result for the customer looking at the brand identity. So can you create assets that they can use on their social medias or inside their mailing lists or even on a website, which is going to start hinting at that end experience for the customer when they're looking at your client's branding and identity. So make sure you're asking your customer, can they articulate what impact the the work that they do or the product that they sell has on their client. This does touch a little bit more on the strategy side, but it's a really important question to ask, and I promise it's going to add a lot more substance and depth to the conversations and design process that you have with your client.